The San Diego skyline glittered like a crown of ambition, and at its heart stood the Sullivan Group's headquarters, a sleek, glass-walled fortress that screamed old money and untouchable power. The top-floor boardroom with its panoramic view of the marina was the stage for the Sullivan family's annual executive summit, a ritual of wealth and legacy where bloodlines trumped all else. 6 years had passed since I last stepped into this building. Back then, I was Jessica Reed, a 24-year-old fresh out of grad school, clutching dual degrees in finance and systems engineering, my head full of dreams and my heart full of hope. That was also the day my aunt, Patricia Sullivan, publicly rejected my application to join the family empire. Her words still stung. "You're bright, Jessica, but you're not one of us. This is a Sullivan legacy." Today, I returned not as Jessica Reed, the dismissed outsider, but as CEO of Pinnacle Solutions, the Sullivan Group's largest client, quietly funneling over $60 million a year through their logistics division. They didn't know it was me. Not yet. The boardroom hummed with the smug confidence of inherited privilege. My cousin, Ethan Sullivan, stood at the head of the table, clicking through a PowerPoint so over-designed it reeked of desperation to impress. "The quarterly report looks promising," he said, his voice smooth with unearned authority. "Thanks in large part to our anchor client, Pinnacle Solutions." I sipped my espresso, hiding the smirk threatening to break free. Ethan's voice echoed from 6 years ago. "Come on, Jessica. You're smart, but you don't belong here. Pedigree matters more than your degrees." Beside him, Patricia beamed. "Excellent work, Ethan. This is why we keep leadership in the family." In the family. The phrase was a blade, even now. I glanced at my tablet, where the real numbers waited, data I'd pulled from their internal files, courtesy of a whistleblower, fed up with Sullivan arrogance. Ethan had been falsifying performance metrics for nearly a year. Losses buried, shortfalls masked. The only thing keeping the Sullivan Group afloat was my company's contracts. "Ms. Reed?" A soft voice interrupted my thoughts. Patricia's assistant, Claire, gestured toward the boardroom doors. "They're ready for your presentation." I rose, smoothing the lapel of my tailored navy suit, a stark contrast to the cheap dress I'd worn 6 years ago when I begged for a chance at this table. Back then, Patricia had sneered, "You don't look like Sullivan material." Now, as I stepped toward the podium, Ethan's voice cut through the room. "Jessica? What are you doing here? This is a closed board meeting." I paused, meeting each confused face around the mahogany table. "I'm here on behalf of Pinnacle Solutions," I said calmly. "We need to renegotiate several contract terms before renewal." The room stalled. Patricia's eyes narrowed. "That's not how this works. Pinnacle always sends an external representative." I smiled. "They do. And you're looking at her?" Silence. Ethan blinked, frozen. My cousin Lauren dropped her stylus, the clatter echoing in the stillness. The weight of truth settled over them like a storm. "That's impossible," Patricia choked out. You run a small startup. We checked your background." I tapped my tablet, projecting my slide deck onto the massive screen. "That startup was a front. Pinnacle Solutions, formerly Apex Consulting, is mine. I've owned and run it. For the past 6 years." Gasps broke the silence. The girl they'd dismissed had become the woman their empire depended on. The first slide lit up with brutal clarity. Pinnacle Solutions audited financials. Annual revenue triple that of the Sullivan Group. Offices in 12 countries. A client list boasting 9 Fortune 500 companies. "No," Ethan stammered, lurching to his feet, pale as death. "That's not possible." "Can't be what?" I asked, my voice steady. "The woman you mocked at the internship mixer? The cousin who wasn't Sullivan enough? Or the owner of the company keeping your books from bleeding red?" Murmurs erupted. "We wouldn't have known," Ethan insisted, his voice cracking. Would you? I arched an eyebrow. The same way you knew about the $8.2 million hidden through inventory manipulation and deferred revenue schemes? His jaw dropped. Board members turned to each other, whispering furiously. Patricia's knuckles whitened as she gripped her armrests. Why come forward now? She demanded. I clicked to the next slide, an analysis of the Sullivan Group's dependency on Pinnacle. It was merciless. 82% of their logistics revenue, 70% of their new growth, and over half their client retention initiatives rested on Pinnacle's infrastructure. Because it's time to renegotiate, I said. And based on what I've uncovered, I'm not sure there's much left to salvage. You can't just walk away, Ethan stammered. Those contracts are up for renewal in 5 business days, I cut in. And as CEO of Pinnacle, I have serious concerns about the Sullivan Group's stability. Your stability, cousin. The room exploded. Board members demanded answers. Patricia shot Ethan a glare that could have shattered steel. Lauren muttered about corporate liability. I stood calm, letting the chaos hit them first. I'll be calling an emergency audit meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m., I said, gathering my tablet. My team will present a full forensic breakdown of your finances. I suggest you show up prepared. This is revenge, Ethan accused, his voice trembling, because we didn't give you a seat at the table. I paused at the doorway, the memory of that rejection 6 years ago still raw. Ethan's smug grin, Patricia's icy stare, the laughter as I walked out, head high but heart in pieces. No, Ethan, I said, meeting his eyes. This isn't revenge. This is business. The very thing you claimed I'd never understand. I glanced at my watch. 9 sharp. Don't be late. Though punctuality was never your family's strength, was it? As I stepped into the hallway, the voices behind me fractured into accusations. Patricia's composure cracked. Ethan tried to justify the numbers. My assistant, Ryan, waited by the elevator, holding a bottle of sparkling water. How'd it go? Exactly as planned, I said, stepping inside. If you thought that boardroom twist was good, wait for tomorrow's audit. Chapter 2. The Seeds of Shame. 6 years ago, I stood in this same lobby, clutching a portfolio of proposals I'd spent months perfecting. I was 24, idealistic, and desperate to prove myself to the Sullivans. My mother, Patricia's younger sister, had married a man outside the family's elite circle, a choice that marked me as an outsider from birth. The Sullivans were old money, their wealth rooted in logistics and real estate, their name a synonym for power in San Diego. I was the niece they tolerated at Thanksgiving, but never invited to the table that mattered. That day, I'd worn a dress I couldn't afford, my hands shaking as I pitched my ideas to join the Sullivan Group's innovation team. I'd spent weeks analyzing their logistics bottlenecks, proposing a digital overhaul that could save millions. I was met with polite smiles and veiled contempt. Ethan, then a rising star, leaned back in his chair smirking. Nice try, Jessica. But this is a family business. You don't get how things work here. Patricia was worse. She didn't bother hiding her disdain. You're not Sullivan material, she said, her voice sharp. Try a smaller firm. It'll suit you better. The room laughed, not loudly, but enough to burn the moment into my soul. I left that day, my dreams of belonging shattered, but a fire sparked inside me. If they wouldn't give me a seat, I'd build my own empire. I started Apex Consulting from a tiny apartment, maxing out credit cards to buy my first server. I worked 18-hour days, cold calling clients, teaching myself code, and studying the logistics industry inside out. My first break came when a mid-sized retailer signed on, impressed by my data-driven approach. From there, I built a team, a network, a reputation. By year 3, Apex Consulting became Pinnacle Solutions, a global player with contracts spanning continents. And the Sullivan Group? They became my client without ever knowing, their logistics division leaning heavily on Pinnacle's infrastructure. I could have stayed hidden, profiting quietly while the Sullivans congratulated themselves. But that rejection, the laughter, the dismissal, the way they'd made me feel small, demanded more. I didn't want revenge, not exactly. I wanted them to see what I'd become. I wanted them to choke on their own arrogance. Chapter 3, The EI Audit Ambush. The next morning, I arrived at the Sullivan Group's headquarters an hour early. The lobby guard, the same one from 6 years ago, stood up so fast he nearly spilled his coffee. "Ms. Reed, welcome," he said, hesitating. "The board's already upstairs." "Early," I murmured. Funny what the scent of collapse does to people. As I stepped into the executive elevator, the polished chrome reflected a woman the Sullivans never saw coming. The boardroom was packed when I entered, the air thick with dread. Patricia sat at the head, her presence hollowed, her usual poise crumbling. Ethan hunched beside the corporate lawyers, flanked by denial and desperation. Independent board members whispered, brows furrowed over printed summaries. Behind me, my team of analysts filed in, handpicked, loyal, and quietly embedded in the Sullivan Group's systems for years, collecting data while the family played legacy games. "Good morning," I said smoothly, taking the podium. "Shall we begin, Jessica?" Patricia's voice was stripped of its edge, almost pleading. "Before we get into this, maybe we could speak privately," she added. I tilted my head. "I think we've had enough private family talks, don't you?" I nodded to my team. "Distribute the reports, please." Papers rustled like a storm. Gasps followed. One board member swore under her breath. "This can't be right," a director muttered, flipping pages. "These losses, these numbers, they're accurate," I confirmed, pulling up my presentation. "Let's start with the creative accounting, shall we?" I looked at Ethan. "Care to explain how over $8 million in losses were hidden under miscellaneous operational expenses?" His lawyer began to object, but I raised a hand. "Or should we skip to the inflated client metrics, the phantom assets, or the fact that without Pinnacle Solutions contracts, the Sullivan Group is technically insolvent?" "You're trying to destroy us," Ethan said, his voice cracking. "No, Ethan," I said, unwavering. "You did that yourself." "Think of your family," he choked out. "Family?" I raised an eyebrow. "You mean when you told half the industry I wasn't cut out for corporate leadership? Or when Aunt Patricia laughed and said I'd never understand real business?" "That was 6 years ago," Patricia said too quickly. "Yes, it was. And while you were guarding the family crest, I was building something from nothing. Today, Pinnacle Solutions is triple the size of the Sullivan Group." I clicked to the next slide. A bar graph showed their dependency in stark terms. 47% of your revenue is tied to Pinnacle, I said evenly. "Revenue that vanishes next Monday if I terminate our contract." The room erupted. Chairs scraped, voices overlapped, lawyers huddled in panic. One board member swore aloud. Then Ethan broke. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he muttered, slumping in his chair. "You can't just pull out, Jessica." Patricia stood, face flushed with fury. "We'll take legal action." "On what grounds?" I asked, my voice cool. "That your rejected niece outperformed your entire executive suite? That your son's fraudulent reporting was uncovered before the SEC got involved?" I leaned forward. "By all means, let your lawyers depose Ethan. I'd love for them to explain the off-book liabilities and phantom revenue streams." A gray-haired board member cleared his throat. "Ms. Reed, given the circumstances, we may need to discuss immediate leadership transitions." "Leadership transitions?" Ethan's voice cracked. "This is our company." "Actually, I said, sliding a sealed envelope onto the table. Not for long. I tapped the envelope. Inside are two options. Option 1, the Sullivan Group agrees to a full restructuring. Ethan resigns. The board appoints independent leadership. We continue a scaled-down partnership with oversight. Option 2? I paused, letting the silence stretch. I walk, every contract gone, and my legal team forwards our audit findings to federal regulators. I checked my watch. You have 1 hour. This isn't business, Ethan spat. It's revenge. No, cousin, I said quietly. It's exactly what you said. Business is ruthless, merit-based, and only for those who prove they belong. I gathered my tablet and notes. I'll be in the office you said I'd never deserve. The CEO suite. Funny how things change. Chapter 4. The Empire Crumbles. Left them in chaos, surrounded by reports, evidence, and panic. By the time I reached the private suite overlooking the harbor, my phone buzzed nonstop. Mom, how could you do this to your aunt? Dad, you're tearing the family apart. Lauren, you've ruined us. I ignored them all, opening a dusty folder buried in my inbox. The rejection email Patricia had sent 6 years ago. Dear Jessica, while we admire your ambition, we feel you lack the leadership instincts required at the Sullivan Group. Perhaps a role with fewer responsibilities would better suit your strengths. Sincerely, Patricia Sullivan. I smiled, clicked archive, and placed a printed copy on what would soon be my new desk. The board, staring at undeniable evidence of Ethan's fraud and the company's reliance on Pinnacle, had one rational path forward: accept my terms or lose everything. By sunset, it was done. Ethan resigned, his exit quiet but inevitable. Patricia, stripped of her influence, was pressured into early retirement, her legacy tarnished. The Sullivan Group, once a fortress of nepotism, would be restructured under my oversight. The empire they'd claimed I wasn't fit to join now reported to me. Ryan stepped in as the final papers were signed, a bottle of chilled champagne in hand. Congratulations, he said, grinning, on your very elegant takeover. Not a takeover, I replied, watching through the window as Ethan and Patricia packed their offices into cardboard boxes. Just business, the kind they said I'd never understand. My phone buzzed again. Mom, you didn't have to humiliate them. Dad, this isn't how family handles conflict. Lauren, we grew up together. How could you? I typed one message to the family group chat. Don't worry about the family name. The Sullivan Group is finally in qualified hands. Then I set the phone down and turned to the window, watching the Pacific fade to orange and gold. Chapter 5. Rebuilding the Ruins. Weeks that followed were relentless. The Sullivan Group's restructuring was a surgical operation, cutting away decades of mismanagement. Independent auditors combed through the books, exposing layers of inefficiency and fraud. My Pinnacle team replaced the old guard, implementing systems I'd designed years ago in that tiny apartment. The board, once a Sullivan loyalist club, diversified, bringing in talent that valued merit over blood. I didn't gloat. The numbers spoke for me. Pinnacle's contracts stabilized the Sullivan Group, but on my terms. The logistics division, once a bloated relic, streamlined under my team's oversight, slashing costs and boosting efficiency. Clients who'd been ready to jump ship stayed, impressed by the new direction. The family fractured. Patricia retreated to her Coronado mansion, refusing my calls. Ethan took a low-level consulting gig in Nevada, his reputation in tatters. Lauren sent a tentative email, apologizing for her silence 6 years ago, but I wasn't ready to forgive. My parents, torn between loyalty to their siblings and pride in me, kept their distance. I let them. This wasn't about family anymore. It was about power, earned undeniable power. The media spun the story into a tabloid saga. Niece's stunning coup topples family empire. I didn't correct them. The truth was simpler. I'd built something they couldn't ignore, and when they tried to dismiss me again, I held their fate in my hands. Chapter 6. The Quiet Victory Months. Later, I stood alone in the CEO suite, the city's lights sprawling below. The desk held that old rejection email, now framed, a reminder of where I'd started. I didn't need it anymore, but it grounded me, a testament to the fire that had driven me here. Ryan knocked, holding a tablet. Latest financials. The Sullivan Group stock is up 15% since the restructuring. Pinnacle's projected to hit $250 million in revenue this quarter. I nodded, unsurprised. And the board? Fully behind you. They're calling you the savior of the Sullivan legacy. I laughed softly. They'll call me whatever keeps the money flowing. He hesitated. You could have let them crash and burn. Why save them? I looked out at the marina, the yachts bobbing in the dark. Because walking away would have been easy, taking their empire and making it better. That's power. That's what they never understood. He nodded, leaving me to the silence. I thought of the girl I'd been 6 years ago, humiliated but unbroken. I'd turned that no into a legacy they couldn't deny. Success wasn't about getting the job I'd begged for. It was about building something so undeniable they had to negotiate with me. And sometimes, the best revenge wasn't revenge at all. It was becoming their boss. Epilogue. Your story, I'm no longer the outsider. The Sullivan Group answers to me, and Pinnacle Solutions is a name that echoes in boardrooms worldwide. But this story isn't just mine. It's for anyone who's been underestimated, overlooked, or shut out by those who were supposed to believe in them. Have you been told you weren't enough? That you didn't belong? I want to hear your story. Because quiet strength makes the loudest impact. You don't need permission to begin. You don't need approval to grow. And you don't need anyone's blessing to become who you were meant to be. So archive that rejection. Build what they said you couldn't. And when they finally see you, make sure it's because you refuse to disappear.